Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and it's fair to say we have reviewed a lot of high-end monitors lately, including an absolute ton of high refresh rate OLED screens. Today, however, we are checking out something that's definitely aiming more for the mass market from a relative newcomer to the monitor space. I'm talking about the ASRock PG27QFT2A, which packs in a 2560 by 1440 180Hz IPS panel for £220. So like I said, it is really targeting that mainstream audience. Today then, we're going to put it through its paces and find out whether or not this screen is worth buying. Kicking things off then with a look at the design of the PG27QFT2A, it's fair to say ASRock has kept things relatively conventional overall. Round the front, for instance, we can see a three-sided frameless design, though there is a slightly thicker chin bezel that measures approximately 20mm thick. Round the back, we again see a relatively simple matte black plastic design, though that PG Phantom Gaming logo does add a splash of colour. The stand, you'll note though, is relatively chunky, and that may well have something to do with the built-in Wi-Fi antenna capabilities, though it also means the monitor feels reassuringly sturdy. ASRock is also using a traditional V-shaped foot, and that measures approximately 45cm across. Circling back though, yes, you did hear me right, I did mention built-in Wi-Fi antenna capabilities, as that is actually a feature of this monitor. Around the back of the stand, you can get a look at those two antenna connectors and the included cable, which you can attach to your motherboard or your Wi-Fi card. Safe to say this is a pretty unique extra, though I am going to do just a little bit of testing on it later on in the video. The stand also features a reasonable amount of ergonomic adjustments, so we get up to 100mm of height adjust. Then we also get 20 degrees of swivel in both left and right directions. And finally, we also get tilt from 5 degrees downwards to 20 degrees upwards. That does mean that there's no pivot functionality here, though VESA 100x100 mounts are supported if you already have a third-party desk mount or something similar. Connectivity options are also very basic, with just two HDMI 2.0 ports, one DisplayPort 1.4, and then an audio jack, and that is it. So there's no modern creature comforts like USB Type-A, let alone USB-C or KVM functionality. Similarly, like many other screens around this price point, ASRock has not opted for an OSD joystick. Instead, you have to use those small fiddly buttons that are positioned on the underside of the front of the screen. Being the first ASRock monitor I reviewed, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this OSD. It's split into 5 main tabs, as you can see here, and there's no denying it is a very basic system. For starters, and to put it politely, it looks very old school and definitely needs a freshen up in terms of its design. Primarily though, it just lacks a number of features that most people would expect to see. Things like an sRGB mode, on-screen crosshair and gamma settings are all missing, to give just 3 examples, while overdrive can only be set on or off, so you don't get multiple options, and there's no Windows-based software either. You do of course get core functionality like brightness, user adjustable color balance and so on, but overall the options are certainly limited.
If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk.
That is it though for our look at the design of this screen, and now we're going to move on to talk about our panel analysis, where we are using Kalman Ultimate software from Portrait Displays alongside an X-Rite i1 Display Pro Plus colorimeter. Starting off our testing then with brightness, we see expected but overall decent results from the PG27QFT2A, considering it's an affordable IPS monitor. The minimum brightness of 83 nits isn't great, but the peak of 425 is good and slightly above the claimed peak of 400 nits. However, it's the low black levels which are even more impressive, and that results in contrast of around 1500 to 1 across the brightness range, which is honestly a really good showing for an IPS panel. Gamut is also impressively wide for this caliber of screen, as it generally surpasses the sRGB space and delivers 93.3% DCI-P3 coverage, 88.9% for Adobe RGB, and then 71.9% coverage of the Rec 2020 color space. Moving on to grayscale testing as well, here I started using completely default out-of-the-box settings, and that includes the normal color balance preset within the OSD. As you can see though, this resulted in a very cool overall picture with an average CCT, or correlated color temperature, of 7,521K, and that's actually a 16% deviation from our target of 6,500K. This of course results in a fairly high grayscale average delta E of 4.42, though it is at least good to see that gamma tracking is fairly accurate, if not just a smidge high at the beginning of the curve. To try and improve matters though, I switched over to the warm color balance preset, and thankfully this results in a big improvement with a new average CCT of 6,866K, as well as a new grayscale average delta E of 2.79. Even then though, using the warm color balance mode, the overall color balance is still a touch cool. So I also tried a manual mode option where I set the red channel to 49, the green channel I left at 50, and the blue channel at 46. And this gave me the best results yet. For instance, we can see that our average CCT dropped to just over 6,600K, and the new grayscale average delta E results are improved further. Of course, you might not be able to verify the accuracy of a manual color balance mode, in which case I do still recommend using the warm color balance preset instead of normal, as it did prove to be more accurate in our testing. But if you can verify the results, I did get our most accurate set of data when using a manual color balance mode. With that in mind then, I actually decided to run each upcoming test twice, once using the default normal color balance mode, but then again using the warm color balance to see what difference is made. With our saturation results, for instance, we went from an average delta E 2000 of 3.99 using the normal option, down to an average delta E of 2.9 thanks to the warm color balance mode, which is a decent result overall, but it's fair to say it's nothing mind-blowing. Color accuracy as well wasn't affected too much by the difference in color balance modes. We saw an average delta E 2000 of 3.09 using the normal option, and then just a small improvement to 2.81 when switching to the warm setting. In both instances, it's actually the 100% blue channel which is the worst offender, as we saw significant oversaturation in that area. Of course, I did also try a full calibration using Calman Ultimate. This locked in grayscale almost perfectly with an average delta E 2000 of just 0.49. It corrected any color balance errors and also helped out gamma tracking. Saturation accuracy also shot up hugely with an average delta E of just 0.28, and color accuracy also saw a similar improvement, this time with an average delta E of 0.36. Of course, it is unlikely that anyone buying this monitor is actually going to run a full manual calibration, as the cost of a colorimeter is going to be about the same as the screen itself. However, it is at least good to know if you do have the required hardware and software tools, you can achieve very decent results from this panel. The same can't be said for viewing angles, however, which are not the best I've seen from an IPS panel, as the image does look noticeably dimmer and less vibrant when viewed from the side. Backlight bleed though is fine, it's nothing out of the ordinary, with just a couple of visible hotspots around the top edge. Moving on though, let's talk about response times and gaming. As we mentioned earlier in this video, ASRock weirdly has not implemented multiple overdrive modes, so overdrive is either on, off, and that's it. Starting at 180Hz then with overdrive turned off, we saw an average response time of 8.22 milliseconds, and if we switch overdrive on, that did improve our average response time to 7.25 milliseconds. This is an okay result. We have seen much better from other LCD screens, but equally we have seen monitors that are a fair bit slower too. The main thing that stands out to me, however, is that even with overdrive turned on, there is still no overshoot, so ASRock could clearly have pushed things a lot further to get faster response times, and that is a definite missed opportunity. Stepping down the refresh rate range then, at 120Hz the results do actually improve, as we see an average response time of 6.66 milliseconds, and honestly only very minor overshoot from one particular transition when overdrive is turned on. Curiously though, when manually setting the refresh rate to 60Hz, overdrive actually becomes grayed out in the OSD, But even with it off, 100% of transitions do occur within the 16.67 millisecond refresh window anyway. To give you a visual demo of this performance then, here we have some pursuit camera images using the Blurbusters UFO test. There's honestly very little visual difference between overdrive on or off with the PG27QFT2A. I think there may be just a tiny bit less visible ghosting with overdrive on, but we're clutching at straws here, and clearly ASRock needs to add more overdrive modes. There is, however, a backlight strobing mode within the OSD called MPRT. This has the usual caveats that adaptive sync must be disabled, and it does significantly limit overall brightness to the point where I actually had to boost brightness in these images so the effect is more visible. What this setting does, however, is improve motion clarity quite significantly with just a small amount of signal crosstalk, which presents as a double image, so for some it could be worth trying. For me personally, however, during my own gaming sessions, I opted not to use the MPRT mode just because it made the screen too dim for my liking. As you would have gathered from all of that data then, it's safe to say this isn't the absolute clearest monitor at 180Hz for gaming, but it was still fine for a few sessions in COD. Bearing in mind as well, I have actually come straight from an OLED monitor to this ASRock IPS LCD, so it definitely took a bit of adjustment time, but I am confident that most people shopping for a £220 LCD will be relatively happy with the performance on offer from this screen. Slower paced games also benefit from the higher than normal contrast for an IPS panel, along with the saturated and punchy colours you get due to this screen's wide gamut. There is, however, a definite lack of gaming features, things like a crosshair, shadow boost, that kind of thing, but whether or not that bothers you is entirely up to you. That said, this screen does at least support adaptive sync, and ASRock says it is FreeSync certified, and I can also say I had no issues using it on my RTX 4090, so happy days there. The last thing I'm going to touch on then just before we wrap up this review is going to be the monitor's built-in Wi-Fi antenna capabilities, which honestly still sounds weird to me even to say after testing it for the last week. I'm no networking expert, so I only ran a few basic speed tests here, first using my motherboard's built-in Wi-Fi with no antenna connected, and then once again when I had hooked up the included cables to this monitor. Lastly though, as an extra test, I also bought a £15 third-party small little mobile antenna thing that I also tried a test with just to see how it compares. As you can see then from this absolutely wonderful little graphic I made, the monitor's built-in Wi-Fi antenna is definitely doing something, significantly boosting speeds compared to no antenna. It is, however, basically the exact same as the cheap aftermarket solution I got on Amazon, so I'm really not quite sure how big of a selling point this is going to be, but at the very least I did just want to include this data for you. So then, that brings us to the end of this review, and overall the PG27QFT2A is a relatively decent monitor. I think you can probably tell it hasn't blown me away in any single area, but I guess it's a bit of a jack of all trades, offering relatively decent performance across a number of areas. Panel quality, for instance, is generally fine. I would recommend using the warm color balance profile instead of the normal option as I showed earlier, but the range of brightness is solid and contrast is actually very good for an IPS panel. There is, however, no sRGB emulation mode, which is a shame, and viewing angles are also a letdown. Response time performance as well follows a similar trend. By enabling overdrive, we saw an average grey-to-grey response time of just over 7 milliseconds, which is okay but hardly super fast. The thing is, ASRock has not implemented multiple overdrive modes. It's either on or off, and even with overdrive turned on, there is absolutely scope to push it a lot further and get faster results, so that is a big missed opportunity. The area where ASRock has clearly tried to differentiate itself from the rest of the market is with the built-in Wi-Fi antenna capabilities. Having said that, I really don't know how big of a selling point this is going to be, as whether or not it's useful to you is going to depend on a whole host of things, and if you're anything like me, you might use Ethernet for gaming anyway. It does at least work based on my testing, but like I said, I think this is quite a niche extra feature. Overall then, like I said, the ASRock PG27QFT2A is a generally decent monitor in a highly competitive area of the market. The main thing I think that's holding it back is a lack of features. Things like no sRGB emulation mode, missing multiple overdrive options, and a complete lack of USB ports I think does hurt the overall appeal. That said, it is priced reasonably at £220, so it is worth considering, especially if it dropped below, say, 200 quid on sale. Anyway guys, that is going to do it for this review, so if you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up, and as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and ding that notification bell so you don't miss when we upload a new video. And if you want to carry on the conversation in our Discord server, I'll leave a link for that down in the description. While there, you can also find a link to check out our merch store where you can pick up a cool t-shirt like the ones on screen. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you could even consider backing us on Patreon. That's it for this one though guys. I'm Dominic for Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next video.